Well, I'm so glad, Michael Malcolm, Reverend Michael Malcolm, to have you on this very first SAGE conversation. We have been looking for sages. It's a word that means so many different things. It's a spice we put in cooking. It's a way we bless events or people with sage, smudging. It's the color of green in the desert, and it also means wise person. So you're our very first interview, and I'm honored to have you on this SAGE conversation. We consider you to be a sage and a leader in the climate justice movement. So thank you.
Thank you, Rev. I appreciate it. And it's funny that I'm hearing that from you. After all, I look up to you as one of my elders and mentors in the movement as well.
Thanks. Well, Michael Malcolm is ordained in the United Church of Christ and is the environmental representative for the Southwest District of the UCC. He's also the founder and executive director for the People's Justice Council and Alabama Arizona Interfaith Power and Light. Anything else that you would want to add to that very brief, perfunctory introduction?
Just a couple of corrections. It's the Southeast Conference of the United Church of Christ, and it's Alabama Interfaith Power and Light. I know you want us to be kin, but and we are, but we're not intertwined to that extent. It's Alabama, Arizona.
Oh, so I said Arizona. Sorry about that.
Well, that's because you always put in Arizona first. I get it. I get it.
Yeah. Well, we've asked our interviewees to begin with a reading or a poem or a prayer that they think is very important and sort of sets their North Star, their values for them.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This particular quote is extremely grounding for me in this work and in life. And it's from Dr. King, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King. And it says, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality.
Amen. That'll preach. I bet you preached on that once or twice.
Once or twice. I've used it once or twice. But I actually, here's how I sum that up, in particular in this work in environmental justice. You can plant pollution, but you can't contain it. The wind blows and the water flows. Yeah. What affects one eventually affects us all.
Well, this is hard work that we're doing. And I wonder, thinking about those words, spirited activists greening the earth, what keeps you spirited? What keeps you enthusiastic and dedicated to this work that you're doing? Are there some sources that you turn to again and again?
Well, I mean, of course, scripture is always in line for me as a Christian minister. My tie to the Gospels, in particular, my model of ministry, which is Jesus the Christ, is always energetic and enlightening, and in particular in the way that he cared for others. It's always a challenge to find yourself caring for others. And that's also what keeps me motivated to do this work as well, is that I'm challenged to care for others. It's always creative, finding creative ways, I guess, of caring for others is always energetic. It's always, I tell people all the time, this is not work for me. This is ministry. And I get up every day looking forward to doing it.
Mm-hmm. Are there certain practices that you have that keep you grounded and centered?
I used to be horrible with the whole keeping grounded and centered. And I look at it more of being balanced. And I'm one that I give in all the way to whatever I do. But during Zoom and this pandemic and emails and all of this, I find myself so inundated with the whole virtual space that I escape that virtual space and to reality by my photography. I am an amateur photographer and very, very much interested in learning that world and just enjoy doing that and capturing beauty and time and being able to enjoy that. I also put it to the work of doing environmental justice as well.
Uh-huh.
And that
I've
keeps me
seen,
balanced.
I've seen many of your photographs. You are quite talented, and I
Thank
think
you.
getting better all the time.
Thank you. I'm practicing at it real hard.
Yeah.
Practicing at it real hard. There was a time I was too busy to do photography, but in the age of the pandemic, because everything has moved so virtually, it's made it necessary to get out and do it.
Yeah.
And so learning it has really taken on a life of its own.
So is your practice of photography, does it influence the way you see the world?
Yes, it very much does. One, I look for the beauty in all things, but I see the reality for what it is. I'm not. So I put me in. I'll just use me for an example in this. So looking at me in the mirror, I don't see all the flaws in my skin. I don't see the age spots from me getting older and anything. It's because of the dimensions that I'm looking. But when I photograph myself, everything's captured. But there's beauty in seeing the everything. When you see the age spots, you realize just how matured you're getting and how God's grace has kept you, and you can realize that you see what is beautiful about that image in that moment, and it gives you those memories. But so I see the beauty and I see the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
And so when you look at environmental justice, just to so I can make sure I loop this in. When you look at environmental justice, I'll use a case in point of a place in Mississippi, Blackman Hole, in Gloucester, Mississippi. You see this place, and looming right over it, you see this biomass plant. And these people live in mobile homes that are somewhat dilapidated, and some are very dilapidated with pieces of the ceiling missing. And you know that the emissions that are coming out of this biomass plant are causing them to have health issues. There's no way you can get around that. That's the ugliness of their situation.
Mm-hmm.
But to see this family who lives on this land, whose father seeded them this land, and they've kept this land, and they've maintained their family culture, and to see the beauty of their closeness and their family, and be able to capture that, and to capture them fighting for a better tomorrow. It's something beautiful in that ugliness. So you see the reality and you see the beauty.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's such an influential thing for people. We live in our own little world and we have blinders on, and to be able to see another person's reality and to see the flaws in our world is an important act that ranks up there with the activism that you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're intertwined. They marry very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of the activism that you do, an activist is somebody who's working for change politically, culturally. Are there, you know, we could go on forever on the changes that we'd like to see in our world, in our country, in our states. But are there, you know, two or three that you would identify as the things that you are most working to change?
Well, I'm going to start very high level. One thing that I want to see is us to actually see each other. I think a lot of the ills that we experience in our society is because of a lack of really seeing one another.
Hmm.
And when I say see one another, I don't mean just look at. I mean to honor the presence of another. So that's one thing, not just the presence, but the personhood as well. So that's one thing. The other thing I'd like to see is for us to address energy burden. When we look at energy burden, not just on our houses of worship, as our IPL model has been influential in, but looking at energy burden on the household and being able to help offset energy burden in the household, in particular with the most vulnerable communities, is extremely important that we do, because a lot of our communities are locked into poverty based on their utility bills.
Hmm.
And if we can help them to relieve some of these burdens, and one of the biggest burdens that they have is energy bills, and we can help to relieve that energy burden, we can also help the planet, and we can help the health of the family.
I've noticed that the tagline for the People's Council on Justice is energizing the South for energy justice.
Yes.
So that's really upfront for you.
Absolutely. That is the our main focus, is for us to address energy burden. But now let me be clear. Although in the South we suffer tremendously from energy burden, and disproportionately so, it is not just limited to the South. Energy burdens happen nationally, and it's our most vulnerable. There are people paying up to 38% of their income to their utilities. There are mothers and fathers who have to make decisions on what their family will eat based on them having to pay for their utilities.
Hmm. So of seeing each other for who we really are, present and people, and then the energy aspect of our lives. What are strategies that you're using to address those two issues?
So we're doing both in the same. We're right now working with communities of faith through our program that we call We Rise, which is a part of the Justice 40 Accelerator. Weatherizing every resident in the Southeast. We're working with communities of faith to reach out in their communities that they serve, to the most vulnerable households, and weatherize their house, help to weatherize their homes. It's a neighbor helping neighbor, train the trainer program that we've initiated, and we work with households of faith to make this happen. And we engage households of faith, ask them to seek out some people, whether they be in the congregation or the community, that they know are suffering from energy burden, so we can come in and be a blessing.
Yeah, yeah. So the verb, greening the earth. I think of the quote from Howard Thurman about the growing edge, and how all around us things are dying, but things are coming to life too. So when you look around and you see the power of the growing edge, where do you see positive things happen, the earth greening, good things happening?
Our youth, Doug.
Mm.
For me, I mean, I'm a fan of our young people. I when they, for the most part, they have it right in their attitude toward one another and toward reality. And so I'm a huge fan of the youth, and they inspired me like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, Reverend Malcolm, who are the sages in your life?
So I have several, but I'll give you my top five. And these people I actually have a relationship with and consider them primary mentors in my life, or mentors in my life. One would be Reverend Leo Woodbury. The other would be Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley. Then there's Reverend Kate Mosley. Then there's my wife. And lastly, I put in there all of IPL, because all of you all have been influential in some way, shape, form, or fashion to my formation.
You had a recent event called Revival for Climate Change, and it was such a powerful, powerful event.
Yeah.
Mostly people of color leading that.
Yeah.
Can you say something about the power of, the margins and speaking truth to power from the margins?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's high time. I don't know what else to really say with that one. It's time. Uh, at this point, we need new perspective. We need new voices. We need new understanding. And so therefore, you got to let those who you kept out for so long in, so you can get that newness that you need, because the old way has caused enough trouble in a real sense. And again, I can't help but be realistic in that. And so when we looked at it, even with putting our program together, the theme of it was flipping the script. We wanted to do something totally different. So you didn't have men host; you had two women hosts. We tried our best to get people of color that were speakers, as well as women that were speakers. And so we had indigenous voices, we had voices from Black folk, we had women speakers, and we wanted to be intentional about doing so because we need some new voices. Mm-hmm. We need some new influence. And so when we look at our climate revivals, which started, that was just the start. But the Southeast Faith Leader Network is launched the climate revivals to happen throughout the year, and we'll be doing them statewide. And we want to make sure that we follow that same intentionality of ensuring that we have justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in the middle of our program, or centered in our program, excuse me.
Reverend Malcolm, thank you so much. You are an inspiration to so many of us, and we need the powerful words of your preaching, and we need the vision that you give us through your photography. So keep it up.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Dad. I appreciate you. Should I say Rev? I appreciate you, Rev.
All right. Blessings on you.
Blessings to you too.